When I first started writing this, it was supposed to be a 1,000 subscriber special. A thank you to everyone who got me that far. But now, we're at 2,000 subscribers, so I guess I'm doubly thankful?
Who are you people?
Just in case YouTube cuts off half the title, as it likes to do. This is part 1 of ICIMI. I'll be covering the first 8 songs, rather than the whole shebang. And yeah, it's a cheap way out of making another hour-long video, but we just finished canon. 16 songs.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa!
That's too damn bad!
Part 2 should be out soonish, in December at the latest. Pinky Promise, for realsies this time. As of 2024, In Case I Make It is the most recent Will Wood album, excepting live albums and remasters. The normal album released in 2020 to great success, but Something Else also released in 2020 to a massive international audience. COVID. It was COVID. The pandemic resulted in a lot of terror and isolation, but amidst this, Will Wood got right to work, writing an album of intensely personal and vulnerable music. I mean, if you're stuck inside, what else is there to do? As detailed in the album's Indiegogo campaign, his primary motivator was a fear of imminent death. The pandemic claimed many lives, and he worried that if he didn't get these songs out as soon as possible, there would be parts of himself he'd never get to show, a piece of his heart that never made it to song. It's for this reason that the album was originally titled In Case I Die, a name repurposed for a later live album. The campaign's description alludes to a vastly different tone and intent than that of his previous work. The normal album's campaign was exciting and flashy, biting the hand of society to make a point. But this doesn't feel like an advertisement. It feels like a request. This set of songs was closer to the heart, and he needed help to do them justice. And sure enough, the fans were there to make it happen. The $75,000 goal was met within 12 hours, and by the campaign's end, that amount had been more than tripled to a grand total of $249,881. Within a year, ICIMI released, boasting a whopping 16 songs, making it his biggest album to date. And as promised, contained within was something much softer, intimate, and more personal than the albums that preceded it. While there are still moments of overwhelming intensity, they're more emotional than flamboyant. As you might imagine, it's gonna be a bit tougher to Death of the Author my way out of this one. For those of you who missed my last 2 videos on Will Wood, I don't like to link the meaning of the songs to Wood's personal life. He's been very clear that he likes his privacy and doesn't like people poking around in his past. But given the nature of this album, I apologize if I do have to talk about his experience, and if so, I'll keep it brief. Another thing, the previous 2 albums were concept albums, a group of songs that are all related by a central theme, or tell a story when put together. That's not the case here. Though I may talk about themes shared by multiple songs, this'll be more of an anthology than a conclusion about the album as a whole. With that, let's get into it. It's no secret that Will Wood is a big fan of rodents. While unfortunately derided as pests and vermin, they're quite social creatures. They can drive cars, clean themselves, and even laugh when tickled. In an interview for the website American Pancake, Wood related the story of a mouse he met in his apartment, trying to take a rind of Parmesan that was just too big to squeeze between the gaps. Wood decided to break the cheese up into smaller pieces, so it could take the cheese with it. Unfortunately, wild mice are infamous for carrying disease, and despite his wishes, he put some poison out at the behest of his landlord. The traps worked all too well, and feeling regret for what he had done, Will wrote an ode to his little friend. It's one of my favorite songs on the album, though there's several competitors. Excepting Selfish, due to its first song being an intro track, we're now at 3 for 3 on fantastic intro songs for Will Wood albums. The folk sound of the album is evident from the opening notes, with a soft acoustic ukulele and gentle tone of voice. We follow the perspective of a mouse, who has found its way into the house of a human. They have dreams of finding a mate, starting a family, and settling down somewhere peaceful. They hope that one day, the humans here will be kind enough to provide food for the mouse and its descendants.
I'll wake up, there'll be food on the stove forever and never want for more.
One night while searching for food, the mouse is seen by a human. They run for cover, choosing to survive hungry rather than risk being killed. But as moments turn to days, our little mouse grows hungrier and hungrier, holding on as long as they can. If they can just wait for food, no matter how much it hurts now, it'll be worth it. Then, a miracle. The mouse crawls out to see a surplus of food on the stovetop, plenty to eat.
More than I could eat, my dreams were finally reality. My struggles had a happy ending. They must want to be friends.
They happily dig in, but something's wrong. They feel pain, thirst, nausea. Unbeknownst to the mouse, the food left out was poisoned, a trap left by the humans. What it mistook for kindness was cruelty. The mouse returns weakly to its sanctuary in the walls, and as it drifts off into sleep, it knows this is the last. Despite its struggles, despite its dreams, this is the end of the road. No home, no family, no food.
I held on so tight for so long, it's just not right. Let a sigh out as I close my eyes.
Throughout this song, the chorus has asked the question, is there cheese in the great beyond? When the mouse is gone, will there at least be something better after? A more peaceful existence, one where it doesn't have to fight for survival. They also wonder why a human would kill them so callously. They meant no harm, they were just hungry. Is their life worth so much less than yours? I won't lie, this song hurts. Not as bad as some later tracks, but I teared up a bit writing this part of the script. What especially gets me is the last chorus.
What's the moon made of? Meet me there after I'm gone.
Why mention teeth growing long? Because that's how a mouse would tell time. This poor little thing that counted the years by how long its teeth were, ate something it thought was a gift, and died cold and alone. What a gut punch to start off with, right? Selfish was an album obsessed with the past. What did the singer do in 2012? Who was he, and who is he now? The Normal album explored what it was like to live with society's expectations. It was concerned with the here and now, day-to-day life. ICIMI, however, wistfully dwells on the future. As strange as it is to imagine, there's a chance we do get to grow old and find peace, even when the world is so uncertain. In his previous album, Will already deconstructed the standards of marriage, but there's still something alluring about it. As you grow older, and in the situation where you find yourself pretty firmly in love, the heart grows a bit fonder towards the idea of settling down. Sure, it doesn't work for everyone, but love does exist. Learning to let down those barriers, to be vulnerable, and to take a look at eternity and admit that you're okay spending it with this person by your side. Our narrator, who I'll call Aristotle this time to keep things simple, reflects on his parents and how he's becoming more like them. Wood stated in an annotation that his parents, even after 30 years of marriage, remained affectionate for each other. He finds this bond beautiful, something to hope for in his own life. As he grows, Aristotle looks upon the example his parents set with less cynicism, wishing to capture that same magic and share it with his own partner.
But I wanna be just like my parents before I was born. Oh, can we be just like my parents?
The fading of cynicism itself is at the heart of this song. Most songs by Will Wood have this bite of sarcasm, a pain caused by the narrator's own actions, or how expectations weigh upon them. Everyone's out to get you, and if you stumble, you'll stand up with bruises no matter what. But love isn't a trap, a scheme for someone to get you. The clever phrasing and negative jokes are few and far between in Lastnames, with more genuine emotion and hope than you ever see elsewhere in the discography. Taken in context with tracks like Better Than the Alternative, it's really moving to see Aristotle suggest names for a daughter, to feel happiness without a catch.
Now we're kissing before brushing. Smile with our whole faces. If you want a hyphen last name, I guess I don't mind the cadence.
Though lost in the fantasy, he takes a step back in the fourth verse, talking about his mistakes and his failures. He assumes that when he's dead, he'll have forgotten all his lost loves, and that the listener, his partner, will have forgotten him as well. Marriage is a lovely dream, but it's not like it actually happened this time, right? This self-deprecation is a defense mechanism, unwilling to bare his heart all the way, for fear of being wounded deeper than he can handle. The twin verses at the song's end both feature imagery of death, as the ultimate conclusion of love. You either die alone and forgotten, or you die in love, fondly remembered but sorely missed. We can only hope for the latter, that our memory brings others to tears and perhaps invites a smile. Aristotle says that he'll likely die alone, but deep down he still hopes that the listener will love him after death. He almost makes fun of himself for wanting these things, seeing the dream as absurd, but with a love like this, he can't deny how badly he yearns for it. This track was kind of handed to me on a silver platter. Nearly all of the annotations for this track on Genius were from Wood himself. So who am I to argue with the creator? I'll just try my best to put together the pieces. You know cicadas, right? They make this noise. All my life I've heard them outside. Well, apparently, they live for like 17 years underground, then burrow to the surface and begin making noise. Wood describes it as screaming. This sound, produced by males, is meant to attract females. And if they're successful, they make babies and then die after a few weeks. If they fail, then they still die after a few weeks, because life is cruel. Just the same, Cicada Days are the time spent screaming for what you want, having come out of your shell, only for it all to be for nothing. A bit confusing out of context, but bear with me. The song itself is about the pain of a breakup versus the pain of staying in a relationship when the going gets rough.
The greener grass grows where the wildfires fertilize.
The grass is always greener on the other side. At least, that's what people commonly believe. A different situation is bound to be better than the one you're in now. The phrase is usually sarcastic, and here it's paired with the imagery of a wildfire, fertilizing the ground after it's burned everything else down. Destruction for the sake of rebirth isn't always as positive of a change as we think it'll be. We start with soft vocals and a ukulele strum, with the song gaining complexity as it goes on. So, pretty much the same as the rest of the album. Aristotle recently went through a breakup, the end to an unstable relationship. At first, he saw the breakup as freedom, the metaphorical greener grass. The Cicada Days were this period where buried emotions erupted to the surface in bouts of screaming. The two have split, but it's only after some separation do they begin to feel regret.
She said it just feels inhumane to lose this much. 'Cause when you leave, you take more than your love.
Wood becomes more emotional as Aristotle recounts more and more of the breakup, with the chorus even changing to fit the tone. A week of Cicada Days turns to seasons. I really like the metaphor our nerves were braided. Two minds, two hearts so closely wound over time that feeling is shared between the two. But to separate would be to sever the braid, ripping nerves and going numb. Aristotle may never know if it was the right decision to break up, but the pain is more than he could have ever imagined. In contrast to Lastnames, We see how painful the vulnerability of love can be, even when breaking it off is the best thing to do. Endings like this can spark that fear of commitment, while even the sweetest beginnings can corrode over time. The piano coming in on the second verse is perhaps my favorite part of the song, but the true climax is in the last chorus. The screaming here isn't something like Vampire Culture or Cotard's Solution, done for a purely musical thrill. In Case I Make It, as an emotional album, uses this intensity to hammer home the sadness, the desperation, to really sell you on the tragedy. Euthanasia is dedicated to Bert, the singer's beloved rat. From how heart-wrenching the song is, it's clear that he meant the world to Will. Having a pet makes you realize how complex and emotional these critters can be. Our little friends can't speak, but they make it clear in other ways how much they love us. Having to say goodbye hurts, but being the one to make that choice is agonizing. When I was a child, my parents got me a basset hound, Fred. He was a big old boy and the sweetest thing you ever met. Now, around my preteens, I was a big germaphobe. Felt like I couldn't touch anything outside without washing my hands. And as much as I loved Fred, I didn't spend as much time with him during those days. It kills me now to think how long he sat there, wondering when I'd come back. Eventually, he gets into his twilight years, becoming older and frailer. One day, I came out to see him slowly walk up to me. I'm worried, so I go to hold him, and then, just like that, he drifts off in my arms. I'll never forget that feeling. After that, I spent more and more time with the ones we had left. But they were all old dogs, and eventually, there was just one left. Dixie. I loved her, and she loved me. We'd go on walks to the end of the road and then back again, and I'd bring her special treats and table scraps. Wasn't sure how much time she had left, but I wanted to make it last. Time passed, and I went off to college. Then one day, I get the call that she's at the vet. She was hurt, and there was nothing they could do but put her out of her misery. I drove back as fast as I could, heart racing, but once again, I made it there just to hold her as she slipped away.
I want to believe that you'll remember me when you're just memory.
I think of Fred and Dixie a lot, how I wish I'd appreciated them more before they were gone. I know that they loved me and chose to spend their final moments with me, and so the least I can do is keep on loving them. Wood speaks on this, acknowledging that loving one who's not there is but a shadow of real emotion. There's a good chance that there is no rainbow bridge, there is no other side, and all I'm feeling is bittersweet nostalgia. But at the same time, we can hope that we're wrong, and that they did make it to a better place. A reward for their lifetime of service, taking care and being there for us when we really needed them. Or at least that somewhere out there, Fred and Dixie and Bert return the love we still feel for them.
Then I choose to believe that we'll meet in sweet dreams after you're put to sleep.
To live in fear is not to live at all. Someone important probably said that, but the best I could find was License to Drive. To take risks is likened to flight, leaving the safety of solid ground to reach heights only dreamt of. You're pulled into the air, faster than you're ready for. Scared, you grasp at the ground, trying to stay still, but already the wind is carrying you towards the stratosphere.
I'm gripping the grass and I'm pulling up daisies.
While simple, the title conveys a difference in perspective of pessimists and optimists. To embrace the unknown can be exciting or scary, either ready for the wondrous places you could go, or afraid of pitfalls you're not prepared for. Where one might see it as flying, another will see it as merely falling upwards. distinguished by a lack of control.
What do you know of control? The wind is simply at your back.
However, despite the fear, Aristotle ultimately resolves to move forward and upward rather than cling to safety. A recurring line in the chorus is, "Only plastic flowers never die." Used in the context of dandelions, they're usually picked to blow on and make wishes. To pick the flower kills it, its only solace being that the seeds may sprout life anew. But that's the way it goes. You can't spend your life afraid of death. The only flowers that live forever are fake, plastic creations. Like the dandelion, you can create things that live on, like art, children, or community. Your dreams surpass you and ride on the breeze, hopefully finding lives of their own. As we move into the second half of the song, this fear of flying becomes more specific. Aristotle's success and fame have carried him this far, but so high above the ground, the risks of falling are ever greater.
The larger they are, the harder they tend to fall.
Fame brings more expectations and more scrutiny, not just from the audience, but from yourself. The bridge oozes with self-doubt.
Eyeline hurts to be in view like stage fright only when it's karaoke night with friends. Leave early, did I earn this stupid hat? Is now really a good time for a new tattoo?
You may have been successful thus far, but are you really talented? Or was it just luck, and will that luck run out? There's only really two options here. Back down to be safe, or move forward to find out. Who knows if you'll keep flying, but until you crash, you might as well shoot for the stars. It's an old saying, but it's oft repeated for a reason.
Come on, everybody, here we go!
Once, while super high, I had a vision of my childhood, or at least the feeling of being a kid again. A voice spoke to me, telling me I could never return to that place. And a moment later, I was ripped from that idyllic scene, back to cold reality. It feels like nearly everyone idolizes their childhood as this time when things were just better. The world wasn't so dark and dreary, food was still a reasonable price, and art had more love put into it. But things still sucked back then. We just weren't usually bothered with taxes and politics. Our developing brains latched on to the simpler joys, like playing outside and eating snacks. As adults, the stress of the modern world makes that state of mind seem more appealing. But even if you sit on the swings and start eating snacks, you can't return to your innocence. You know far too much to turn back. In this song, Aristotle laments the expectations of adulthood. This imagery of nursery rhymes, childhood games, and prayers pops up every verse, along with a continuing allusion to Peter Pan.
To incubate the shadows you can stitch back to your soul.
The last song made use of the phrase, second star to the right, the path one takes to get to Neverland. Here, Wood references Peter's shadow that escaped to Earth. When Peter finally catches it, Wendy helps sew its feet back to his own soles, reuniting the two. And I doubt that this specific reference is just to invoke feelings of childhood. Throughout the song, Aristotle sings to a dream girl who he wishes would sweep him off his feet. In the story of Peter Pan, he brings Wendy to Neverland to act as a mother figure to him and the Lost Boys. However, she begins to have feelings for him that he doesn't reciprocate, and eventually leaves to return home. Wendy grows up, while Peter stays in Neverland, remaining forever young. The mother part is excised, but there's still this longing towards the dream girl, conflicting with Aristotle's attachment to his innocence. Though subtle, sexual references creep in during the latter half of the song.
Dream girl, come, but keep your hands off me. Go on back to bed, my love. That's where dreams are supposed to be.
Aristotle yearns for love, but isn't ready for the physical side of things, rejecting or denying it when it comes up.
But come and rail, come read over my hands, and you'll see that it's me who cries mercy while your fingers curl.
Even a simple gesture between couples, holding hands, elicits feelings of nervousness, withdrawing, crying mercy at the extension of romantic interest, despite craving it deep down. For Aristotle, life is moving much too fast, and he feels unprepared to handle these pressures, wanting just to retreat to a simpler time.
Telling time, promise I'll never have fun again. If you'd stop flying, but then you start crying, never mind, you win.
This whole verse is pretty crucial to Aristotle's feelings in the song, though it is a bit confusingly worded. On paper, it's simple. Time flies when you're having fun, and so he promises to not have fun if time could just slow down for once. But no one can just slow down. The world will move on as it always has. And so he gives up, crying, "Never mind, you win." I never got this while listening though, because the break between "fun again" and "if you'd stop" makes them seem like separate statements. It's one of those things that is clever and sounds good because Wood's a good singer, but doesn't translate as well to music. In the end, a voice speaks to Aristotle, echoing the song's title.
Alright, that's enough, let's get you home.
It's the kind of thing you'd say to someone who's had a bit too much to drink. They shouldn't stay here. They should get home and get some rest. Sleep it off. He can't stay cooped up in this childhood nostalgia forever, whether or not he does find love. It's best he returns back to reality for now, as cold and unfamiliar as it might be.
What I said was I love you.
Love can be a scary, painful thing. It's great, don't get me wrong. Sighing contentedly, staring at someone who means the world to you, finding joy in their most mundane habits. I'd give it 4 out of 5 stars. The 5th star I leave out, because it can also make you completely bonkers. Sweating the small stuff, worrying that they hate you, and even just kicking off a relationship in general. I tell ya, not for the faint of heart. Track 7 sees Aristotle relate his own fear of love, something new compared to his general fear of everything.
I'm afraid of black sedans, white vans, and computers.
He's never gotten close enough to someone before to fall in love, and thus isn't afraid going into things. But as the two draw near, as he begins to be fully perceived, love becomes a sweet torture to our narrator.
Hold me like a tourniquet, and how you like an Iron Maiden.
It's not that he wants to leave or that he doesn't care. He's afraid that the more his partner knows, the less they'll love him back. Paranoia manifests as extreme self-deprecation, calling himself weak, narcissistic, and implying that he's not even human.
Spend me out, you don't know where I've been. Hold me at claw's length, baby.
As a result, there's some give to his love, a feeling of restraint that keeps him from being earnest. On one hand, being rejected, hated for your flaws would be terrifying, a confirmation of all your worst fears and neuroses. On the other hand, he finds commitment just as scary, a life spent waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the love to sour, for something to go wrong. He can't really win fighting his own mind. Though the end of the song indicates that this isn't as much an internal monologue as it is a speech to the partner themselves. The bridge sees Aristotle tripping over himself, apologizing, trying to justify himself to the listener. He admits these lyrics as thoughts I struggled to come up with, to make me sound deep and smart, summing it up as anything but I'm in love with you. He can't possibly just leave it at I love you. He has to explain there's something wrong with him that might drive them away, to warn his partner before they get hurt, while also begging them to love him. And in the end, all they can say in response is,
I mean, it's kind of a lot.
Because what do you say to all that? It's an understandable feeling, being overwhelmed when you're so vulnerable. But love is a leap of faith. You can't overthink it. I haven't talked as much about the music, because it's all of a similar pattern. Ukulele and piano, gradual build-up, intense vocals at the climax, and fade out. But I do like Will's range on this song, and use of warbling audio, similar to some of his stuff on Everything Is a Lot. Due to the title, people love to tie this song to that album, but I don't think there's a deeper connection at play. Addiction is one of those things that snowballs, getting perpetually worse and dragging you down further as it develops. Your tolerance increases, as does your dosage and physical dependence. It's not impossible to recover, but when you've fallen down so far, it's a long climb back up. As this song reminisces, even when you've made it back up, there's a physical and mental toll. No one lives in a vacuum, and the struggles of an addict can put pressure on their friends, family, and career. By the time you've put the pieces back together, the puzzle won't look quite the same as it did before it fell apart. And yet, Aristotle finds that 5 years later, his life goes on.
Wonder how I didn't die. This is not my life. I'm no survivor. I only happened to survive.
Wood's annotations put emphasis on the line, "This is not my life," something he often says at shows with massive crowds. It's disbelief that he could have made it this far, let alone be famous. There's a sense of gratitude, noting that he could have just as easily been dead or in jail as a result of addiction. Not everyone is that fortunate, but after all the damage it did, he doesn't get off scot-free. His punishment is to live with the regret, to lay down in the bed he's made, unable to change the past, or even remember some of it. Mind you, all we know of these consequences are the words out of Aristotle's mouth. How his loved ones feel is left ambiguous. Will's music often features unreliable narrators, paranoid and off their rockers, describing their own thoughts and feelings. It's not a reflection of the actual situation, but more their perspective on it. We saw this in the track previous, where Aristotle perceived himself as this unlovable, flawed monster, blowing his flaws out of proportion. 5 years have passed on his road to recovery, and he's still trying to make amends for his actions. He wants to justify his second chance, to pour his past down the drain. Notably, there's a line in the second verse highlighting how far he's come, that doubles as a tongue-in-cheek reference.
When I've been feeling this awful since I hit bottom and said, hand me my shuffle, I'm going in.
This phrase prominently features in Selfish, an album about an amnesiac grappling with their past and identity. Seeking truth no matter the cost, the protagonist digs deeper until they find themselves at rock bottom with nothing to show for it. On the other hand, this song ends with the line,
It's a half-decade hangover, hand me my ibuprofen.
It's a sign that Aristotle has grown, seeking help and healing rather than hurting himself. Though he has a while to go, judging by the guilt and shame he still expresses. One day, he may perhaps forgive himself, when the hangover finally wears off. The instrumental break between verse 3 and the preceding chorus deserves mention, as a gritty segue into Wood's desperate pleas. Piano grows more intense as a distorted drum beat and droning sound emerge from the background to take center stage. I thought the droning at first to be a voice, almost like the repeating chorus from Selfish, but especially as it fades out in the song's final moments. It sounds artificial, inhuman, when the preceding music thus far has a much simpler sound, made using mostly piano and strings. The delve into glitchy electronic instrumentation is a bit jarring, but I think it adds to the mood, feeling like you've woken up hungover after the smooth and sweet sounds of the album thus far. And if you consider this an epilogue to the Tapeworms era sound, when Wood's voice was surrounded by a cacophony of bombastic horns and electric guitar, it certainly sounds like the groggy morning after a night of chaos. With that, we reach the midpoint of the album, with Vampire reference in a minor key ahead on the horizon. As mentioned, this is part 1 to a 2-part video. It was pretty daunting to take on this album, given how heavy the subject matter is, the massive song list, and the escalation I established with Normal Album. I want to do this album justice, and if I condensed it into a singular video, I worry that I would have ended up half-assing or rushing through segments to try and get it out. I'm a very lazy and impatient person, so as you might imagine, large-scale projects prove a nightmare for my self-control. Nevertheless, it won't be too long before part 2 comes out. There's some other projects I've been itching to make for a while that'll be coming out in the meantime, but it won't be as long of a hiatus this time, now that I've already broken the ice. I hesitate to draw a conclusion when we're only halfway through, but one recurring theme of the album is fear. Not that it wasn't present throughout the previous discography, but a lot of songs here are about fear of the future, fear of healing, fear of love. To grow up and move on is a scary thing as you step into the unknown, especially when you have your fair share of baggage, a laundry list of past mistakes that threaten to repeat themselves. But the answer is always to move forward anyway. You can't stop living your life, and time won't slow down for you. It's not easy to learn to trust yourself, to trust others, especially when there's always the chance that things could go wrong again. But that's life. You walk the tightrope, and when you fall off, you climb back up. Why? I don't know. There's some pretty neat stuff along the way. That's all for now, but make sure to check back in a month or two for part 2. I'll be hard at work in the meantime. And if you haven't already seen them, make sure to check out my deep dives on Selfish and the Normal album. They're probably almost as good as this one. Thanks for watching, and until next time, see ya!